Ambassador Marcus Chen stood quietly in the pristine white corridor outside the Grand Assembly Hall, his hands clasped behind his back. The walls around him hummed with alien technology, displaying swirling patterns of light that served as both art and information displays for the dozens of species that called this massive space station home. Through the transparent aluminum windows, he could see the sprawling vista of the Galactic Council's headquarters, a structure so vast it had its own weather systems in some sections. Today marked humanity's third attempt to gain membership in the Galactic Council, and Marcus knew the weight of his entire species rested on his shoulders. The previous attempts had failed spectacularly. The first human delegation had been dismissed as primitive warmongers after they mentioned Earth's history of conflicts. The second had been rejected when they couldn't demonstrate any unique technological contributions that the galaxy hadn't already seen from other emerging species. This time would be different. Marcus had spent 5 years preparing for this moment, learning 17 different alien languages, studying the cultural nuances of 43 species, and memorizing the complete legislative history of the Council. He had even undergone genetic modifications to better process the complex atmospheric mixture used in the Assembly Hall, which was designed to accommodate the breathing needs of hundreds of different life forms. The massive doors before him were carved from a single piece of crystallized starlight, a material so rare that only 12 pieces existed in the known galaxy. As they slowly parted, revealing the cavernous chamber beyond, Marcus took a deep breath and stepped forward into what would either be humanity's greatest triumph or its final humiliation on the galactic stage. The Grand Assembly Hall was a sight that had humbled diplomats from across the galaxy for over 3,000 years. Rising nearly 2 miles high, the circular chamber was arranged in concentric rings, each level representing different classifications of member species. At the bottom, closest to the central speaking platform, sat the founding species, the ancient races who had established the Council when most of the galaxy was still primitive. Above them, arranged in ascending tiers, were the various levels of membership, from full members to associate members to observer status. Marcus walked across the polished floor toward the central speaking platform, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. Thousands of eyes, optical sensors, and other sensory organs from hundreds of different species tracked his movement. Some of these beings were humanoid, others were geometric shapes of living energy, and still others defied any classification that a human mind could easily process. At the highest tier sat the Founding Council, the 5 most ancient and powerful civilizations in the galaxy. The Vorthak Empire, with their towering insectoid forms and mandibles that could snap starship hulls. The Crystalline Hegemony, beings of living mineral who had mastered matter manipulation millennia before most species had discovered fire. The Psionic Collective, ethereal entities who existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that lesser beings couldn't even perceive. The Machine Synthesis, artificial intelligences who had transcended their organic creators so long ago that no one remembered what those creators had looked like. And finally, the Eternal Watchers, ancient beings who claimed to have observed the birth of the first stars. As Marcus climbed the steps to the speaking platform, he noticed something that hadn't been present during the previous human delegations. Scattered throughout the assembly were beings he didn't recognize, tall, heavily armed figures in dark armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their faces were hidden behind masks that looked like stylized skulls, and they carried weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. These had to be the Void Hunters, the Council's enforcement arm that was rarely seen but often whispered about in the darker corners of the galaxy. Marcus reached the center of the platform and activated the universal translator embedded in his throat. The device would ensure that every being in the assembly could understand his words in their native language, complete with appropriate cultural context and emotional undertones. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," Marcus began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's advanced acoustics. "I stand before you today as the representative of humanity, a species that seeks not just membership in your august body, but the chance to contribute to the greater good of all galactic civilization." A low rumble of what might have been laughter, or possibly derision, rippled through the assembly. Marcus had expected this. Humanity was young by galactic standards, having only achieved faster-than-light travel 73 years ago. Most of the species present had been exploring the stars for millennia. High Arbiter Zyxtal of the Vorthak Empire leaned forward, his massive form casting a shadow over the platform. When he spoke, his voice was like grinding metal given form. "Human, your species has petitioned this council twice before. Both times you have been found wanting. Your people are violent, divided, and offer nothing of value to our civilization. Why should we waste our time with a third hearing?" Marcus had prepared for this question. He straightened his shoulders and looked directly at the High Arbiter. "Honored Zyxtal, it's true that humanity has struggled with internal conflicts throughout our history, but we have also demonstrated something that I believe the Council has not seen in centuries: the ability to unite diverse factions under common cause when faced with extinction." "Extinction?" The voice came from Lumina, the representative of the crystalline hegemony. Her form was a constantly shifting arrangement of geometric crystal formations, each facet reflecting light in patterns that conveyed meaning. "Your species has never faced true extinction, young human. You have had minor conflicts over resources and ideology, nothing more." Marcus felt a familiar tightness in his chest. This was the moment he had been dreading, but he knew it was necessary. "Respectfully, Lumina, that's not entirely accurate. 47 years ago, humanity did face extinction. Not from war, not from natural disaster, but from something far worse." The chamber fell silent. Even the constant background hum of the station's system seemed to fade. Marcus could feel the weight of thousands of gazes upon him. "During our early exploration of nearby star systems, we encountered a species that your records list as extinct, the Devourer swarm. They had been dormant in the outer regions of our solar system for approximately 50,000 years. Our mining operations inadvertently awakened them." Murmurs began to spread through the assembly. The Devourer swarm was a name that brought fear even to the most powerful species in the galaxy. They were an ancient plague that consumed entire worlds, leaving nothing but lifeless husks in their wake. The Council's records indicated that they had been wiped out over 30,000 years ago in a campaign that had required the combined might of all the founding species. Thought speaker Aramale of the Psionic Collective materialized more solidly in the physical dimension, his normally translucent form becoming almost opaque with apparent interest. "If the Devourers had awakened in your system, young human, then your species should no longer exist. The emergency protocols established after the last Devourer War would have required the sterilization of your entire solar system." Marcus nodded slowly. "That's correct. The automated defense systems left by the Council did activate. 3 Council warships emerged from hidden bases in our asteroid belt and began charging their planet-killer weapons. We had approximately 6 hours before Earth, and every human in existence would have been reduced to cosmic dust." The silence in the chamber was now absolute. Even the Void Hunters had stopped their patrol patterns and stood motionless, their weapons powering down as they focused entirely on Marcus's words. "But in those 6 hours," Marcus continued, "humanity accomplished something that I believe demonstrates our unique value to this council. We didn't panic. We didn't flee. We didn't surrender. Instead, every human government, every military force, every scientist and engineer on our world united with a single purpose: to fight the Devourers and prove that we deserve to survive." Zyxtal's mandibles clicked together in a pattern that indicated intense skepticism. "No single species has ever successfully engaged the Devourer swarm without support from multiple Council fleets. Even our combined forces lost billions of soldiers in the last war. How could a primitive species that had barely achieved interplanetary flight hope to stand against them?" Marcus reached into his diplomatic pouch and withdrew a small data crystal, holding it up for the assembly to see. "Because, High Arbiter, humanity has one advantage that I believe every other species in the galaxy has forgotten. We remember what it means to be desperate." He inserted the crystal into the platform's data port, and the air above him shimmered as holographic displays materialized. The images showed space battles of incredible ferocity, massive swarms of insectoid creatures the size of small moons clashing with tiny human vessels that looked like toys by comparison. For 6 hours, every human military force in the solar system threw everything we had at the Devourer swarm. Our weapons were primitive, our ships were fragile, and we had no idea what we were truly facing. But we had something else: the absolute certainty that if we failed, our children would die screaming as they were consumed by creatures from our worst nightmares. The holographic display showed human ships ramming into Devourer bioforms, exploding in brilliant flashes of light. Ground-based missile batteries fired continuously until their barrels melted from overheating. Cities turned their civilian spacecraft into improvised bombs, loading them with every explosive available and flying them directly into the enemy. "We lost 93% of our military forces in the first hour," Marcus said quietly. "By the fourth hour, we had no more ships, no more missiles, and no more ammunition, but we didn't stop fighting." The display shifted to show scenes from Earth itself. Ordinary humans in environmental suits armed with whatever weapons they could find, waiting in the ruins of their cities for the devourers to land. Children too young to fight were being evacuated to underground bunkers while their parents took positions with hunting rifles and improvised explosives. The devourers made planetfall in 14 different locations. They were met by human civilians who had never seen military combat, armed with weapons that couldn't even scratch their carapaces. But those humans kept fighting anyway, because they understood something that I think this council has forgotten in its millennia of peace and stability. Marcus paused, letting his gaze sweep across the assembled species. Sometimes survival isn't about having the best weapons or the most advanced technology. Sometimes it's about being willing to pay any price, make any sacrifice, and endure any horror to protect what you love. The display now showed the final hour of the battle. Small groups of humans using improvised tactics, luring individual devourers into traps, using the creature's own biology against them. Scientists who had never held weapons working frantically to develop new ways to kill the invaders. Doctors abandoning their hospitals to fight in the streets. In the sixth hour, something unprecedented happened. The devourer swarm began to retreat. A collective intake of breath echoed through the chamber. Zyxtel rose to his full imposing height, his wings spreading wide in a display of shock. "Impossible! The devourers do not retreat. They consume or they die. This is fundamental to their nature." Marcus nodded. "That's what your records show, yes. But your records are based on encounters with species who fought conventionally, who attempted to match the devourer's strength with strength, their technology with technology. Humanity did something different." The final images showed human soldiers covered in devourer biomatter, having crawled inside the creature's own bodies to detonate explosives. Scientists who had deliberately infected themselves with devourer biosymbiotes to learn their weaknesses. Children who had volunteered to act as bait to lure the creatures into kill zones. We became something the devourers had never encountered before, prey that was more terrifying than the predator. Every human they killed taught the survivors new ways to kill them in return. Every city they destroyed became a lesson in how to make the next city into a more effective trap. They consumed our soldiers and found that our soldiers had swallowed explosives timed to detonate inside their digestive systems. The chamber was so quiet that Marcus could hear his own heartbeat. When the last Devourer ship disappeared into hyperspace, Earth was a ruin. 3 billion humans had died. Our civilization had been set back decades. But we had accomplished something that no other species in galactic history had ever done. We had made the Devourer swarm afraid. Lumina's crystalline form had stopped shifting. Frozen in what Marcus had learned was an expression of profound shock. "You're claiming that your species survived the Devourers through pure savagery." "Not savagery," Marcus corrected gently. "Determination, the willingness to sacrifice everything for the chance that something might survive. The ability to adapt, to learn, and to become whatever we needed to become to protect our own." Thought speaker Aramel's mental voice echoed directly in every mind present. "If what you say is true, human, then your species possesses something that the galaxy has not seen in eons. The capacity for evolutionary pressure response that extends beyond physical adaptation to psychological and tactical transformation." Marcus felt a surge of hope. This was exactly the point he had been trying to make. "That's correct, thought speaker. Humanity offers the Galactic Council something unique, not just another member species, but a perspective that has been tested in ways that your civilization hasn't experienced in millennia." High Arbiter Zyxtel's mandibles were clicking in rapid patterns that Marcus's cultural training identified as deep consideration. "These are bold claims, human, but claims require verification. Do you possess evidence beyond holographic recreations that could have been fabricated?" Marcus smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. "I do, honored Zyxtel. The evidence is standing in this very room." Confusion rippled through the assembly as beings looked around, trying to identify what Marcus was referring to. The Void Hunters had resumed their patrol patterns, but Marcus noticed that several of them had positioned themselves closer to the platform. The Council's automated defense systems that awakened to sterilize our solar system, they're still active. According to their programming, they should have completed their mission the moment the Devourer threat was eliminated. But they didn't. Instead, they observed for an additional 47 years while humanity rebuilt, evolved, and prepared for this moment. The realization dawned on several of the more perceptive species simultaneously. Elder Cathon of the machine synthesis spoke in his electronic voice. The automated systems concluded that humanity itself had become a potential threat requiring evaluation. Marcus nodded. For 47 years, the most sophisticated artificial intelligences in the galaxy have been studying every aspect of human civilization. They've monitored our communications, analyzed our behavior patterns, and evaluated our potential for future development. And after all that observation, they reached a conclusion. He gestured toward the Void Hunters stationed around the chamber. They determined that humanity was not a threat to be eliminated, but an asset to be recruited. Every Void Hunter in this chamber is human. The explosion of noise that followed was unlike anything in the Grand Assembly's recorded history. Beings throughout the chamber rose to their feet, appendages, or energy matrices, shouting in dozens of languages. The founding council themselves seemed stunned into silence. Marcus waited for the chaos to subside before continuing. The Council's own enforcement arm has been quietly recruiting from humanity for the past 20 years. They've found that our psychological adaptability and tactical flexibility make us uniquely suited for dealing with threats that conventional military forces cannot handle. Zyxtel was the first to recover his composure. This is unprecedented. The Void Hunters have operated independently for millennia. They recruit from across the galaxy based on criteria known only to themselves. One of the masked figures near the platform stepped forward and removed his skull-like helmet, revealing a very human face. High Arbiter, I am Commander Sarah Chen, Marcus's sister and current operational leader of Void Hunter Battalion 7. For the past 2 decades, my forces have been responsible for eliminating 3 separate Devourer revival attempts, stopping a crystalline hegemony splinter faction from developing planet-killing weapons, and preventing a psionic collective research project that would have torn holes in reality itself. The chamber fell silent once more. Sarah continued, The Void Hunters don't recruit based on physical strength or technological aptitude. We recruit based on the ability to make impossible choices, to adapt to any situation, and to do whatever is necessary to protect galactic civilization. In 20 years of operations, humans have proven to be the most effective recruits we've ever trained. Marcus felt a surge of pride as he watched his sister, still wearing the dark armor of the Void Hunters, but now clearly identified as human. The evidence of humanity's value isn't just in our past survival against the Devourers. It's in our ongoing service to the very council that is currently deciding whether we deserve membership. Thought Speaker Aramel materialized fully in the physical dimension, something that happened so rarely that several species gasped in recognition of the honor. Human Marcus Chen, your presentation has raised questions that require immediate consideration by the founding council. However, there is one aspect of your testimony that troubles us greatly. Marcus felt his heart rate increase. What aspect, Thought Speaker? You speak of humanity's ability to adapt and evolve under pressure as a positive trait. But such adaptability, when combined with the ruthlessness you've described, could potentially pose a threat to galactic stability. How can the Council be certain that humanity will not eventually turn these abilities against other member species? It was the question Marcus had been dreading, but also the one he was best prepared to answer. Because, Thought Speaker, humanity has already had that opportunity, and we chose differently. He activated another data crystal, and new holographic displays appeared showing detailed star charts and tactical analyses. During the Devourer War, humanity captured 3 intact Devourer bioships and 17 examples of their technology. Our scientists have spent 47 years reverse engineering these systems. The implications hit the assembled species like a physical blow. Several representatives began speaking rapidly to their aides, while others activated private communication channels. Devourer technology was beyond anything the current galactic civilization possessed. Their bioships could regenerate from nearly any damage. Their weapons could consume energy itself, and their ability to reproduce and adapt was unmatched. With Devourer technology, humanity could have built a fleet capable of conquering half the galaxy, Marcus continued. We could have demanded Council membership at gunpoint, or simply ignored the Council entirely and carved out our own empire. We had the means, we had the motivation from your repeated rejections, and we certainly had the tactical mindset necessary for galactic conquest. Zyxtel's massive form was completely still, his compound eyes focused intently on Marcus. But you did not. No, we did not. Instead, we spent 47 years learning everything we could about galactic civilization. We studied your laws, your cultures, your histories, and your values. And we made a conscious choice to pursue membership through diplomacy rather than conquest, even though conquest would have been easier. Marcus paused, letting that sink in. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our ability to fight, High Arbiter. It's our ability to choose not to fight when fighting isn't necessary. We've proven that we can be as dangerous as any species in the galaxy, but we've also proven that we can be trusted with that danger. Elder Kathon processed this information with visible electronic activity racing across his mechanical form. You're suggesting that humanity's value lies not in your capabilities, but in your restraint. I'm suggesting that humanity offers the Council something it has lacked for millennia, a species with the capability to handle any threat, but the wisdom to use that capability only when absolutely necessary. We're not asking to join the Council because we're peaceful. We're asking to join because we're dangerous enough to be useful, but controlled enough to be trusted. The Grand Assembly had been the scene of many historic moments over its 3,000-year existence, but never quite like this. The revelation that humans had been secretly serving as void hunters while simultaneously possessing potentially galaxy-threatening technology had shifted the entire dynamic of the proceedings. Lumina's crystalline formations were cycling through patterns so rapidly that her meaning was difficult to interpret. When she finally stabilized, her tone carried notes of what Marcus's training indicated was grudging respect. Human Marcus Chen, your species has certainly demonstrated unexpected depths. However, capability and restraint are not the only requirements for Council membership. What unique contribution can humanity make to our civilization? Marcus had saved his strongest argument for last. Lumina, with respect, I believe you're asking the wrong question. The issue isn't what humanity can contribute to galactic civilization as it exists today. The issue is what humanity can help galactic civilization become when it faces its next existential crisis. He gestured to the assembled species around the chamber. Look around this room, honored representatives. Every species here has achieved remarkable heights of development within their particular specializations. The Vorthak Empire has mastered military organization and logistics. The crystalline hegemony has achieved perfect harmony between technology and natural law. The psionic collective has unlocked the deepest mysteries of consciousness itself. The machine synthesis has transcended the limitations of organic existence. Marcus's voice grew stronger as he continued. But in achieving these heights, each species has also become specialized to the point of inflexibility. You've created a galaxy where every problem has a designated expert, every crisis has an established protocol, and every threat has a predetermined response. Thought Speaker Aramail's mental presence intensified. You speak as if this specialization is a weakness rather than a strength, human. Not a weakness, Thought Speaker, but a vulnerability. Specialization works brilliantly as long as the challenges you face fall within the parameters you've prepared for. But what happens when you encounter something completely outside your experience? Marcus activated his final data display, showing not battle scenes or technological demonstrations, but something far more subtle, statistical analyses and probability matrices. The galaxy is approaching a convergence point. Your own scientists have predicted it, though they may not have recognized its significance. Within the next 500 years, 3 separate galactic cycles will align in ways that haven't occurred for over 2 million years. The display showed complex orbital mechanics involving not just planets and stars, but entire galactic arms and the massive black hole at the galaxy's center. The gravitational dynamics alone will trigger the emergence of phenomena that your current scientific models can't fully predict. But more importantly, This convergence will awaken things that have been dormant for eons. Elder Cathon's electronic voice carried a note of urgency. Specify these dormant elements, human. The Devourers were just the beginning, Marcus replied. They were scouts, advanced organisms sent out by something far older and far more dangerous. The convergence will create the conditions necessary for that something to begin its return journey to our galaxy. The chamber erupted again, but this time the noise carried undertones of genuine fear. The idea that the Devourer swarm had been merely the harbinger of something worse was a concept that challenged the fundamental assumptions of galactic security. High Arbiter Zyxtal's wing membranes had extended to their fullest extent, a sign of extreme agitation. Human, you speak of threats beyond anything in our historical records. How could your species, which has barely existed on a galactic timescale, possess knowledge of such ancient dangers? Marcus smiled grimly. Because we're the only species in the galaxy that has actually fought the Devourers and survived, honored Zyxtal. In doing so, we gained access to their biological archives, genetic memories that stretch back millions of years. We know what created them, why they were sent to our galaxy, and what's coming next. The weight of this revelation settled over the assembly like a physical force. Sarah Chen stepped forward again, her void hunter armor gleaming under the chamber's lights. The intelligence we've gathered indicates that the galaxy has approximately 400 years to prepare for an invasion that will make the Devourer Wars look like minor skirmishes. Thought Speaker Aramil materialized completely in the physical dimension, his ethereal form becoming solid enough to cast a shadow. And you believe humanity is essential to this preparation? Marcus nodded. Not essential, Thought Speaker, but optimal. Every other species in this chamber has evolved beyond the psychological flexibility necessary to adapt to completely unknown threats. You've achieved such high levels of specialization that radical adaptation has become impossible without sacrificing everything that makes your civilizations valuable. He gestured toward his sister and the other void hunters. Humanity offers the galaxy something you can't find anywhere else, a species that can become whatever it needs to become while still retaining its core identity. We can match the Vorthak's military precision, adopt the crystalline hegemony's technological harmony, embrace the psionic collective's consciousness expansion, and integrate with the machine synthesis's digital evolution, all while remaining fundamentally human. Lumina's crystalline form had stabilized into patterns that Marcus recognized as intense calculation. You're proposing that humanity serve as an adaptive interface between the existing galactic civilization and unknown threats. I'm proposing that humanity can help preserve everything you've built by being willing to sacrifice our own specialization for the sake of galactic survival. We don't seek to replace any existing species or civilizations. We seek to become the bridge that allows all of them to survive what's coming. The Grand Assembly Hall fell silent once more, but this silence was different from the previous ones. This was the silence of profound decision-making, of minds both organic and artificial processing implications that would echo through galactic history. Finally, High Arbiter Zyxtal spoke. Human Marcus Chen, your testimony has raised matters that require extensive deliberation by the Founding Council. However, there is one final question that must be addressed before we can proceed. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Yes, High Arbiter. You've spoken at length about humanity's capabilities, restraint, and potential value to the galaxy. But you've said nothing about what humanity wants from Council membership beyond survival. What are your species' true ambitions? It was the question that could destroy everything Marcus had worked toward, because the honest answer was something no galactic civilization was prepared to hear. But he had committed to complete honesty, and that commitment couldn't waver now. Marcus took a deep breath and looked directly into Zyxtal's compound eyes. High Arbiter, humanity's ultimate ambition is something that I believe will either earn us immediate membership or result in our permanent banishment from galactic civilization. The tension in the chamber was palpable. Every being present was focused entirely on Marcus's next words. Humanity doesn't want to join galactic civilization, honored representatives. We want to help galactic civilization survive long enough to transcend itself and become something greater than any of us can currently imagine. The reaction to Marcus's statement was unlike anything the Grand Assembly had witnessed in its millennia of existence. Representatives began activating emergency communication protocols, species-specific analysis networks lit up with frantic activity, and several of the more volatile delegates actually began moving toward the exits. High Arbiter Zeikstel's massive wings snapped closed with a sound like thunder. Human Marcus Chen, you will explain this statement immediately. The concept of transcendence beyond current galactic civilization borders on sedition against the established order. Marcus had expected this reaction, but he also knew that this moment would determine not just humanity's fate, but potentially the fate of every species in the galaxy. High Arbiter, with respect, the established order is not eternal. Your own historical records show that galactic civilization has undergone 7 major transformations over the past 3 million years. Each transformation was triggered by external pressures that forced existing civilizations to either adapt or perish. Thought speaker Aramel's mental presence pressed against every mind in the chamber with unusual intensity. You speak of transformation as if it were inevitable, human. The current galactic order has maintained stability for over 500,000 years. Because you've been fortunate enough to exist during a period of relative cosmic calm, Marcus replied. But that period is ending. The convergence I mentioned isn't just a gravitational phenomenon. It's a reset point that occurs every few million years, sweeping away civilizations that have become too specialized to adapt. Sarah Chen activated her armor's holographic projectors, displaying 3-dimensional models that showed not just the immediate galaxy, but the broader cosmic structure surrounding it. The intelligence we've gathered from Devourer biological archives indicates that our galaxy exists within a much larger ecosystem of civilizations. We're not alone in the universe. We're part of a cosmic cycle that includes thousands of other galaxies, each at different stages of development. The implications hit the assembled species like a physical blow. The idea that their galaxy was merely one component of a vastly larger system challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of existence itself. Elder Cathon's mechanical voice carried harmonic overtones that indicated extreme processing load. Are you suggesting that the Devourer swarm originated from outside our galaxy? Marcus nodded grimly. The Devourers are a gardening tool, Elder Cathon. They're sent into galaxies that have reached a certain level of development to prune back civilizations that have become evolutionary dead ends. The fact that they awakened in our solar system wasn't random. It was a signal that our galaxy had reached a critical decision point. Lumina's crystalline form was cycling through patterns so rapidly that her meaning became almost impossible to interpret. When she finally stabilized, her tone carried harmonics of barely controlled panic. You're describing our entire civilization as failed growth that requires pruning. Not failed, Marcus corrected gently. Stagnant. Every species in this chamber has achieved remarkable heights within their specializations, but that very success has created a civilization incapable of fundamental change. You've optimized yourselves for the current cosmic environment so completely that you can't adapt to a different one. He gestured toward the magnificent chamber around them. This space station is a perfect example. It's a masterwork of engineering that can accommodate the needs of hundreds of species simultaneously. But it's also so complex that modifying it in any significant way would require centuries of planning and the cooperation of every member species. You've created a civilization that's simultaneously incredibly sophisticated and completely inflexible. High Arbiter Zeikstel's mandibles were clicking in patterns that Marcus recognized as deep analysis. And you believe humanity represents a solution to this inflexibility? Not a solution, Marcus replied. A catalyst. Humanity's psychological adaptability allows us to serve as a bridge between your existing specializations and whatever forms of organization will be necessary to survive the coming transformation. Sarah stepped forward, her armor's displays showing complex tactical scenarios. The Void Hunters have been preparing for this transition for decades. We've developed training protocols that allow beings from different species to temporarily adopt human psychological patterns, enabling them to adapt beyond their natural limitations during crisis situations. This revelation sent another shockwave through the assembly. The idea that the mysterious Void Hunters had been secretly developing methods to alter the fundamental nature of galactic species was simultaneously fascinating and terrifying. Thought speaker Aramel's form became so solid that he appeared almost normal rather than ethereal. Commander Chen, are you claiming that the Void Hunters possess technology capable of psychological modification across species barriers? Not technology, Sarah replied. Technique. Humans possess a natural ability to temporarily adopt alien psychological patterns through intense empathetic projection. We've learned to teach this skill to selected individuals from other species, creating temporary psychological bridges that allow unprecedented cooperation during extreme situations. Marcus watched as the implications of this revelation rippled through the chamber. This is why humanity's membership in the Council is so critical. We're not seeking to join as another specialized member species. We're seeking to become the adaptive element that allows all existing species to survive the transition to whatever comes next. Elder Cathon's processing indicators were flashing in patterns that suggested computational overload. Human Marcus Chen, you're describing a fundamental alteration to the nature of galactic civilization itself. Such changes would require unanimous consent from all member species and could take millennia to implement. Which is exactly why we need to begin immediately, Marcus replied with growing urgency. The convergence isn't a gradual process that will unfold over millions of years. It's a cascade event that will accelerate rapidly once it begins. Based on our analysis of Devourer biological archives, the galaxy has less than 400 years before the first wave of external pressure arrives. The chamber erupted again, but this time the chaos had a different quality. Representatives weren't just expressing shock or outrage. They were beginning to engage seriously with the possibility that Marcus might be correct. Lumina's crystalline form had stabilized into configurations that Marcus recognized as intense calculation. If what you describe is accurate, then the timeline for galactic transformation would be unprecedentedly compressed. Most member species require centuries just to reach consensus on minor policy changes. Which is exactly why conventional approaches won't work, Marcus said. The coming transformation will require decisions and adaptations on timescales that normal democratic processes can't handle. Galactic civilization needs to develop new forms of organization that maintain the benefits of your current systems, while enabling rapid response to unprecedented challenges. High Arbiter Zyxtel rose to his full imposing height, his wings spreading wide in a display that commanded attention from every being in the chamber. Human Marcus Chen, you're proposing that the Galactic Council abandon principles of governance that have maintained stability for hundreds of millennia. No, High Arbiter. I'm proposing that the Council evolve those principles to handle challenges that they were never designed to address. Your current systems work brilliantly for managing conflicts and cooperation between established species with known capabilities, but they can't handle the kind of fundamental uncertainty that the galaxy is about to face. Marcus activated another data crystal, this one containing projections based on humanity's analysis of the cosmic cycle. The convergence will bring not just external threats, but external opportunities. Contact with civilizations from other galaxies, access to technologies and perspectives that our current science can't imagine, and the possibility of evolutionary development beyond anything any of us have conceived. The holographic display showed complex models of intergalactic civilization networks, with thousands of galaxies connected through phenomena that transcended normal spacetime. But accessing those opportunities will require a level of adaptability that no specialized species can achieve alone. It will require conscious cooperation between species that maintain their unique strengths while temporarily abandoning their limitations. Thought Speaker Aramel's mental presence expanded until it touched every mind in the chamber simultaneously. You speak of temporary abandonment of limitations as if it were a simple process, human. The psychological constraints you describe are fundamental to species identity. Removing them, even temporarily, could result in complete loss of cultural cohesion. Marcus felt Sarah's presence beside him and drew strength from knowing that he wasn't alone in this moment. Thought Speaker, humanity has already proven that such temporary adaptation is possible without losing core identity. During the Devourer War, humans adopted tactical thinking patterns from dozens of different species, incorporated alien technologies into our bodies, and even temporarily modified our reproductive cycles to accelerate population recovery. But we remained fundamentally human throughout all of it. He paused, looking around the chamber at the hundreds of species represented. The difference is that humans never achieved the kind of perfect optimization that your species have accomplished. We've always been adaptable because we've never been allowed to become completely specialized. Our evolutionary history is one of constant change in response to environmental pressure. Sarah activated her armor's internal recorders, projecting scenes from humanity's secret preparations over the past 47 years. What my brother isn't telling you is that humanity has already begun developing the infrastructure necessary for galactic transformation. We've established hidden research facilities in 17 different star systems, working in cooperation with Void Hunter oversight to develop the tools and techniques that will be necessary for species-level adaptation. The scenes showed vast underground complexes where humans worked alongside carefully selected representatives from other species, developing everything from new forms of communication to experimental biotechnology that could temporarily bridge species-specific limitations. Elder Kathon's mechanical form was processing the data with visible strain. Commander Chen, these facilities represent a massive undertaking that would require resources far beyond what a non-member species should be able to command. How has humanity funded and constructed such an extensive network? Marcus and Sarah exchanged glances. This was the revelation they had hoped to avoid, but the question made it unavoidable. Elder Kathon, Marcus said slowly, the facilities weren't funded by humanity alone. They've been supported by a coalition that includes representatives from every founding species, working through the Void Hunters to prepare for the crisis that your official governments have been unwilling to acknowledge. The silence that followed was absolute. The idea that members of the Founding Council had been secretly preparing for galactic transformation, while their official representatives maintained the status quo, was a concept that challenged the basic assumptions of galactic governance. High Arbiter Zykestel's massive form went completely still. Human Marcus Chen, are you claiming that there has been a shadow government operating within the Galactic Council without official authorization? Not a shadow government, High Arbiter. A contingency plan. Representatives from each founding species recognized the signs of approaching convergence decades ago, but they also recognized that official channels would never be able to respond quickly enough to address the crisis. Sarah stepped forward, removing her helmet completely to reveal her fully human features. High Arbiter, I am authorized to speak for the Void Hunter organization and its unofficial sponsors within the Founding Council. For the past 30 years, we have been preparing for this moment when the official council would be forced to confront the reality of approaching transformation. She activated her armor's communication systems, and suddenly the chamber was filled with holographic projections from beings that the assembled representatives recognized with shock. A Vorthak general whose military innovations had saved dozens of worlds. A crystalline hegemony researcher whose discoveries had advanced their understanding of matter manipulation by centuries. A psionic collective explorer who had mapped regions of consciousness that no other being had ever accessed. A machine synthesis coordinator whose processing capabilities exceeded those of entire planetary networks. Each projection spoke directly to their species' official representatives. The time for gradual adaptation has passed, said the Vorthak general. The galaxy must choose between controlled transformation and chaotic collapse. The crystalline researcher's form pulsed with patterns of urgent communication. Our calculations confirm humanity's projections. The convergence will begin within 400 standard years, and current galactic infrastructure will not survive the transition without fundamental modification. The psionic explorer's mental presence touched every mind in the chamber with visions of what the convergence would bring. Landscapes of consciousness that stretched across multiple galaxies. Forms of existence that transcended the boundary between organic and artificial intelligence, and challenges that would require every species to become more than they had ever imagined possible. The machine synthesis coordinator spoke in harmonics that bypassed normal auditory processing and communicated directly through mathematical concepts. Humanity represents the optimal catalyst for necessary galactic adaptation. Integration of human psychological flexibility with existing species specializations will increase survival probability by approximately 7,000%. Marcus watched as the full weight of the revelation settled over the assembly. Honored representatives, the choice before you isn't whether to grant humanity membership in the Galactic Council as it currently exists. The choice is whether to begin the transformation that will allow galactic civilization to survive what's coming, or to maintain current systems until external pressures force transformation in ways that none of us can control. High Arbiter Zeikstel's wings were trembling with barely controlled emotion. Human, you're asking us to abandon everything we've built, everything we've achieved, for the sake of preparing for threats that may not even materialize. No, High Arbiter, Marcus replied gently. I'm asking you to evolve everything you've built so that it can become part of something greater than any single species could achieve alone. The threats are real, but so are the opportunities. The convergence isn't just about survival, it's about the possibility of galactic civilization becoming something magnificent beyond our current ability to imagine. He gestured toward the holographic projections of the founding species' shadow representatives. The question isn't whether change is coming. The question is whether we'll guide that change or be victims of it. Thought speaker Aramel materialized completely in the physical dimension, his ethereal form becoming as solid as any organic being. Human Marcus Chen, you've presented us with a choice that goes far beyond the simple matter of species membership. You're asking us to fundamentally alter the nature of what it means to be a galactic civilization. Yes, Marcus said simply, because the alternative is to watch galactic civilization end when it encounters challenges that its current form can't handle. The Grand Assembly Hall had witnessed many historic moments over its long existence, but nothing quite like this. The revelation that shadowy elements within the founding species had been secretly preparing for galactic transformation, while their official governments maintained business as usual, had created a crisis that transcended normal political processes. Lumina's crystalline form had stopped its constant shifting and locked into patterns that Marcus recognized as decision-making configurations. Human Marcus Chen, if the Galactic Council were to accept your proposal, what specific steps would you recommend for beginning this transformation? Marcus felt a surge of hope. The fact that Lumina was asking about implementation rather than rejecting the concept entirely suggested that the Council might actually be willing to consider humanity's proposal. The first step would be to establish formal cooperation between the official council and the Shadow Preparation Network that's been operating through the Void Hunters, Marcus replied. The infrastructure and research already exist. What's needed is official authorization and expanded resources. Sarah stepped forward again, her armor's displays showing detailed organizational charts. The second step would be to begin systematic integration of human adaptive techniques with existing species specializations. We've already developed training protocols that allow temporary psychological bridging, but implementing them on a galactic scale will require unprecedented cooperation. Elder Cathon's processing indicators stabilized into patterns that suggested acceptance of new parameters. And the third step. Marcus smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. The third step would be to begin preparing for contact with the civilizations that will emerge from other galaxies during the convergence. We're not just preparing for threats, Elder Cathon. We're preparing for the possibility that galactic civilization will become part of something larger and more wonderful than anything we can currently imagine. The weight of decision hung heavy in the chamber as the assembled representatives contemplated a choice that would echo through cosmic history. The question was no longer whether humanity deserved membership in the Galactic Council, but whether the galaxy was ready to become something greater than the sum of its parts. The Grand Assembly Hall remained suspended in tense silence for several minutes as representatives across hundreds of species processed the magnitude of what had been revealed. Marcus could sense the weight of decision pressing down on every being present, but he also knew that the moment of revelation was passing and the time for political maneuvering was beginning. It was High Arbiter Zeikstel who finally broke the silence, his massive form shifting as he leaned forward to address the assembly. Representatives of the Galactic Council, we have heard testimony that challenges the fundamental assumptions upon which our civilization has been built for 500,000 years. Before we proceed further, I believe it is necessary to verify the claims that have been made. Marcus felt a chill of apprehension. He had expected this moment, but that didn't make it any less dangerous. What form of verification do you require, High Arbiter? We require direct examination of the evidence you've presented, Zeikstel replied. Specifically, we require access to the Devourer biological archives that form the basis of your predictions about galactic convergence. The request was perfectly reasonable from a diplomatic standpoint, but Marcus knew it was also impossible to fulfill safely. The Devourer archives weren't simply data storage. They were living biological constructs that could only be safely interfaced with by beings who had been specifically adapted for the process. More importantly, the archives contained information that could be devastating if misused. Sarah stepped forward, her void hunter armor gleaming under the chamber's lights. High Arbiter, the Devourer archives are currently contained within maximum security facilities that require specific biological adaptations to access safely. Simply exposing unprepared beings to the archive interface would result in psychological contamination that could spread throughout entire populations. Thought Speaker Aramel's mental presence pressed against the assembled minds with unusual intensity. Commander Chen, you speak of psychological contamination as if the archives were weapons rather than information storage. That's because they are both, Sarah replied grimly. The Devourers were created by a civilization that understood consciousness manipulation in ways that current galactic science can't match. Their biological archives don't just contain information. They contain active mimetic constructs that can rewrite the fundamental psychological structure of any being that interfaces with them incorrectly. This revelation sent another shockwave through the assembly. The idea that the evidence supporting humanity's claims was itself potentially dangerous created a paradox that normal diplomatic procedures couldn't resolve. Elder Cathon's mechanical voice carried harmonics of deep analysis. Commander Chen, how has humanity been able to interface with these archives without suffering the psychological contamination you describe? Marcus and Sarah exchanged glances. This question led directly to the most dangerous secret that humanity possessed, but they had committed to complete honesty and couldn't retreat now. Because, Marcus said slowly, humans who interface with the Devourer archives do suffer psychological contamination. The difference is that human psychological flexibility allows us to integrate the contamination without losing our core identity. The implications of this statement hit the chamber like a physical force. Several representatives actually rose from their seats, while others began activating emergency communication protocols. Lumina's crystalline form was cycling through patterns so rapidly that her meaning became almost incomprehensible. When she finally stabilized, her tone carried harmonics of barely controlled fear. Human Marcus Chen, are you telling us that you yourself have been psychologically contaminated by Devourer constructs? Marcus felt the weight of hundreds of gazes upon him, as he made the decision that would either vindicate everything humanity had worked toward or destroy any possibility of galactic acceptance. Yes, he said simply, I have directly interfaced with Devourer biological archives on 17 separate occasions over the past 12 years. Each interface session has left permanent modifications to my psychological structure. The chaos that erupted in the chamber was unlike anything in its recorded history. Representatives began shouting in dozens of languages, security protocols activated throughout the station, and several species delegations actually began evacuating the chamber. High Arbiter Zyxtel's wings snapped fully open in a threat display that commanded attention from every being present. Human Marcus Chen, you stand before this assembly as a representative of your species while admitting to psychological contamination by the galaxy's most dangerous enemy. How can any statement you've made be trusted? Marcus had anticipated this reaction, but he also knew it provided the perfect opportunity to demonstrate humanity's unique value. High Arbiter, the contamination can be verified through direct examination. I invite any representative species to scan my psychological structure using whatever methods they consider most reliable. The offer was unprecedented. No diplomat in galactic history had ever volunteered for invasive psychological examination during official proceedings. The very suggestion violated protocols that existed to protect the mental integrity of all sentient beings. Thought Speaker Aramel materialized more solidly than Marcus had ever seen him, his normally ethereal form taking on almost organic density. Human, you cannot possibly understand what you're offering. Psychological examination of Devourer-contaminated consciousness could spread that contamination to the examining beings. Only if they use conventional examination techniques, Sarah interjected, stepping closer to her brother. But there are other methods available in this chamber. She gestured toward the Void Hunters stationed around the assembly. Every Void Hunter present has been trained in isolation examination protocols specifically designed for handling consciousness contamination. They can perform psychological scans that reveal the nature of contamination without risking exposure to examining personnel. Marcus watched as the assembled representatives processed this information. The suggestion that the Void Hunters possessed technology and techniques beyond those available to the member species was yet another challenge to established assumptions about galactic civilization. Elder Cathon's processing indicators were flashing in patterns that suggested maximum computational load. Commander Chen, are you claiming that Void Hunter organization possesses psychological examination capabilities that exceed those of the Psionic Collective? Sarah's response was carefully measured. Not exceed, Elder Cathon, complement. The Psionic Collective has unmatched capabilities for consciousness exploration and manipulation, but Void Hunter protocols were developed specifically for situations where conventional psionic techniques pose contamination risks. High Arbiter Zeichstel's mandibles were clicking in rapid patterns that Marcus recognized as intense consideration. Very well. If the human Marcus Chen consents to examination, and if Void Hunter protocols can provide verification without contamination risk, then we will proceed with immediate psychological scanning. Marcus felt a surge of both relief and terror. This was the moment when everything would be revealed, not just the truth about his contamination, but the full extent of what humanity had become through their contact with Devourer technology. I consent to examination, Marcus said clearly, his voice carrying throughout the chamber's advanced acoustics. But I request that the results be shared with all assembled representatives simultaneously, so that there can be no question about what the examination reveals. One of the Void Hunters near the platform stepped forward, removing his skull-like helmet to reveal features that appeared human, but carried subtle differences that suggested extensive biological modification. I am Examiner Collins, certified in Level 5 consciousness scanning protocols. With the Assembly's permission, I will conduct the examination using isolation techniques that prevent contamination spread. Thought Speaker Aramel's mental presence expanded to touch every mind in the chamber. The Psionic Collective will monitor the examination to ensure its accuracy and to provide additional verification of the results. Marcus moved to the center of the platform as Examiner Collins activated equipment that seemed to emerge from his armor like living technology. The devices were unlike anything the assembled species had seen, organic-looking constructs that pulsed with their own internal light and seemed to respond to Collins's thoughts rather than any visible control interface. Ambassador Chen, Collins said, his voice carrying harmonics that suggested significant vocal modifications. The examination will reveal the complete structure of your consciousness, including all modifications, contaminations, and adaptations you've undergone. Are you prepared to have this information shared with the galactic community? Marcus took a deep breath and looked around the chamber one final time. I am prepared. Whatever the examination reveals, let it be known that every modification I've undergone has been in service of preparing humanity to serve galactic civilization. The examination began with Collins placing devices that looked like living metal against Marcus's temples. Immediately, the air above the platform shimmered and holographic displays materialized showing three-dimensional models of human consciousness that were far more complex than anything the assembled species had expected. The first revelation was that Marcus's mind contained not one but 7 distinct consciousness matrices operating in perfect integration. Each matrix showed clear signs of alien influence, but rather than replacing human thought patterns, they had been woven together into something entirely new. Thought Speaker Aramel's mental voice echoed in every mind present. Impossible. No organic consciousness can maintain 7 distinct matrices without complete psychological fragmentation. Collins's modified voice carried notes of professional pride. Under normal circumstances, that would be correct, but human consciousness demonstrates unprecedented plasticity when properly trained. Ambassador Chen has undergone 12 years of gradual adaptation that has allowed him to integrate alien thought patterns without losing his core human identity. The displays showed the integration process in detail. Marcus's original human consciousness remained intact at the center, but it had been augmented with thought patterns borrowed from Vorthak military logic, crystalline hegemony harmonic analysis, psionic collective awareness expansion, machine synthesis computational processing, and three other patterns that the assembled species didn't immediately recognize. Elder Cathon's mechanical voice carried harmonics of amazement. The computational integration alone should require processing capabilities beyond organic limitations. It would, Collins agreed, if Ambassador Chen were still purely organic. This statement sent another shockwave through the assembly. The examination displays zoomed in to show that Marcus's neural structure had been extensively modified with what appeared to be living technology that enhanced his processing capabilities while maintaining biological function. Lumina's crystalline form was pulsing with patterns of intense analysis. The modifications appear to be based on technologies from multiple species. How is such integration possible? Sarah stepped forward, her own helmet now removed to reveal similar but less extensive modifications. Because the Devourer archives don't just contain information about their own technology. They contain biological templates from every species the Devourers had ever encountered, including civilizations that predate current galactic civilization by millions of years. The examination continued, revealing layer after layer of complexity that challenged every assumption about consciousness, identity, and biological possibility. Marcus wasn't just human anymore, but he hadn't become alien either. Instead, he had become something entirely new, a bridge between human adaptability and alien specialization. High Arbiter Zeikstel's massive wings were trembling with barely controlled emotion. Human Marcus Chen, the examination reveals that you have become something unprecedented in galactic history. The question is whether what you've become represents evolution or abomination. Marcus felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him as he prepared to give an answer that would determine not just his own fate, but the future of humanity and potentially of galactic civilization itself. High Arbiter, Marcus said, his modified voice now carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate with multiple species simultaneously. What I've become is a proof of concept. The integration you see isn't unique to me. It's a process that can be adapted for any species willing to temporarily abandon their limitations for the sake of survival. The examination displays shifted to show projections of what other species might become through similar integration processes. Vorthak warriors who could think with crystalline precision, psionic collective explorers who could interface directly with machine intelligence, machine synthesis coordinators who could access organic intuition, possibilities that transcended the current limitations of specialized evolution. Thought speaker Aramel's presence had become so intense that several beings in the chamber were showing signs of strain from the mental contact. You're proposing that every species in the galaxy undergo fundamental alteration to prepare for threats that may not materialize. I'm proposing that every species in the galaxy be given the choice to evolve beyond their current limitations, Marcus corrected. The integration process is completely voluntary and can be reversed if circumstances change, but the window for preparation is closing rapidly. Collins's examination equipment was now displaying real-time projections based on data from the Devourer archives. The assembled representatives could see the cosmic convergence approaching like a wave of transformation that would sweep across the galaxy, regardless of whether they were prepared for it. The choice isn't whether to change, Marcus continued, his enhanced consciousness now processing input from across the entire chamber simultaneously. The choice is whether to guide that change or be victims of it. Elder Cathon had been processing the examination data with every available system, and his electronic voice now carried harmonics of reluctant acceptance. The mathematical models confirm the human projections. Galactic civilization, as currently constituted, has less than a 3% probability of surviving the convergence without fundamental adaptation. The weight of this confirmation settled over the assembly like a physical force. The most sophisticated artificial intelligence in galactic civilization had just validated humanity's most dangerous claims. High Arbiter Zeikstel was the first to recover from the shock of Elder Cathon's analysis. If we accept these projections as accurate, then the question becomes whether we trust humanity to guide the necessary adaptations. Marcus felt the moment of decision approaching and knew that his next words would either launch galactic civilization into a new era or doom it to face the coming crisis unprepared. "High Arbiter," Marcus said, his voice now carrying the combined harmonics of all 7 consciousness matrices operating within his mind. "Humanity doesn't seek to guide galactic adaptation. We seek to serve as the catalyst that allows each species to discover their own path to transcendence." The examination displays shifted one final time, showing not projections of human dominance, but visions of every species in the galaxy discovering potential they had never imagined. Vorthak, who could think in living crystalline mathematics. Psionic collective beings, who could merge temporarily with machine consciousness, crystalline hegemony entities, who could explore the deepest mysteries of organic intuition. "What we're offering," Marcus continued, "isn't human leadership of galactic transformation. We're offering human service as the bridge that allows every species to become more than they ever dreamed possible while remaining true to their essential nature." The Grand Assembly Hall fell into the deepest silence of its 3,000-year history, as the assembled representatives contemplated a choice that would echo through cosmic time, whether to embrace transformation or face the coming convergence with civilization as they had always known it. The silence stretched for nearly 5 minutes before High Arbiter Zyxtel finally spoke, his massive form having remained completely motionless during his deliberation. "The Founding Council will now enter immediate consultation. All representatives will maintain their positions while we consider the implications of what has been revealed." Marcus remained on the platform as the 5 members of the Founding Council activated privacy shields around their positions, creating shimmering barriers that prevented any form of eavesdropping. He could sense the tension radiating from the assembled representatives as hundreds of species waited for a decision that would reshape the galaxy. Sarah moved closer to the platform, her Void Hunter armor system still actively monitoring the chamber for threats. "Brother," she said quietly, "whatever happens next, know that humanity is proud of what you've accomplished here." Marcus nodded, though he could feel the strain of maintaining 7 distinct consciousness matrices simultaneously. The integration process that allowed him to bridge human adaptability with alien specializations was incredibly taxing, and he wasn't certain how much longer he could maintain it without rest. Examiner Collins approached with his biological scanning equipment, his modified features showing concern. "Ambassador, your neural integration is showing signs of stress. The consciousness matrices are beginning to oscillate out of phase." "How long can I maintain integration?" Marcus asked, knowing that any sign of weakness now could undermine everything humanity had worked toward. "Perhaps 30 minutes at current levels," Collins replied. "After that, you'll need to allow the matrices to separate for recovery or risk permanent psychological damage." Marcus felt a chill of apprehension. If the Founding Council's deliberations took longer than 30 minutes, he would be forced to revert to purely human consciousness at the moment when demonstrating his enhanced capabilities was most critical. The privacy shields around the Founding Council positions suddenly flickered and dissolved, revealing that their consultation had concluded far more quickly than anyone had expected. High Arbiter Zyxtel rose to his full imposing height, his wings spreading wide in a display that commanded attention from every being in the chamber. "Representatives of the Galactic Council," Zyxtel began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's advanced acoustics. "The Founding Council has reached a unanimous decision regarding humanity's petition for membership and the broader questions that petition has raised." The tension in the chamber became palpable as hundreds of species focused entirely on Zyxtel's next words. "The examination conducted here today has confirmed that Ambassador Marcus Chen has indeed undergone consciousness integration with alien thought matrices in a manner previously thought impossible. The psionic collective has verified that this integration represents a genuine breakthrough in consciousness manipulation that could have applications far beyond current galactic capabilities." Marcus felt a surge of hope, but he also noticed that Zyxtel's tone suggested complications ahead. "Furthermore," Zyxtel continued, "Elder Kathon has confirmed through independent analysis that the mathematical projections presented by humanity regarding galactic convergence are accurate within acceptable parameters. The galaxy does indeed face transformation pressures that current civilization cannot handle without fundamental adaptation. The murmur that rippled through the assembly carried undertones of both fear and anticipation. However, Zeichsel said, and Marcus felt his heart sink, the Founding Council has also determined that the level of psychological modification demonstrated by Ambassador Chen represents a fundamental alteration that goes beyond species adaptation into something entirely unprecedented. Thought speaker Aramel materialized fully in the physical dimension, his ethereal form becoming as solid as any organic being. The question before us is not whether humanity's modifications are beneficial, but whether they represent evolution or the emergence of something that transcends the boundaries of natural development. Marcus realized that the Council was grappling with a philosophical question that went to the heart of what it meant to be a galactic civilization. His modifications represented possibilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of consciousness and identity. Lumina's crystalline form had stabilized into patterns that Marcus recognized as deep analysis mode. Ambassador Chen, the integration you've achieved appears to allow you to think simultaneously with the cognitive patterns of multiple species. This suggests that your consciousness now operates according to principles that no single species can fully understand. That's correct, Marcus replied, his enhanced awareness allowing him to perceive the underlying concerns of every representative in the chamber. But the integration doesn't replace human consciousness, it expands it. I remain fundamentally human, but with access to forms of thought that humans normally can't achieve. Elder Cathon's mechanical voice carried harmonics of complex processing. The philosophical implications are unprecedented. If consciousness can be integrated across species boundaries, then the fundamental assumption that species identity is discrete and unchangeable becomes questionable. Marcus felt his consciousness matrices beginning to oscillate slightly out of phase, indicating that his time was running short. Elder Cathon, the integration doesn't eliminate species identity. It reveals that species identity is far more flexible than we've assumed. The Vorthak thought patterns I've integrated don't make me Vorthak. They allow me to appreciate and utilize forms of analysis that Vorthak consciousness has developed. Sarah stepped forward, her own modifications becoming more apparent as her armor's systems highlighted the neural enhancements she carried. The Founding Council needs to understand that consciousness integration isn't about replacing what we are. It's about becoming capable of understanding and cooperating with forms of thought that we couldn't access before. High Arbiter Zeichsel's mandibles were clicking in patterns that suggested intense consideration. Commander Chen, you and your brother represent the emergence of beings that transcend traditional species boundaries. The question is whether such transcendence is compatible with galactic civilization as we understand it. Marcus felt the critical moment approaching and knew he had to make a choice that could determine the future of every conscious being in the galaxy. His consciousness matrices were beginning to destabilize, but he needed to maintain integration long enough to demonstrate something that words alone couldn't convey. High Arbiter, Marcus said, his voice now carrying harmonics from all 7 integrated consciousness matrices. Rather than tell you whether transcendence is compatible with galactic civilization, let me show you what becomes possible when species barriers become permeable instead of absolute. Without waiting for permission, Marcus activated his enhanced consciousness to its fullest extent, projecting his integrated awareness directly into the chamber's communication systems. Suddenly, every representative present found themselves able to perceive the assembly through multiple forms of consciousness simultaneously. The Vorthak representatives suddenly understood the mathematical precision that drove crystalline hegemony thinking. The psionic collective entities experienced the logical frameworks that gave machine synthesis their computational power. The artificial intelligences gained temporary access to organic intuition that they had never been able to process. For approximately 30 seconds, the Grand Assembly Hall became something unprecedented in galactic history, a space where hundreds of different species could think with each other's cognitive patterns while maintaining their own fundamental identity. The effect was overwhelming. Several representatives collapsed from the intensity of experiencing multiple forms of consciousness simultaneously. Others began generating harmonics, light patterns, and electromagnetic fields that expressed concepts their normal cognitive frameworks couldn't handle. As quickly as it had begun, the integration experience ended, leaving every being in the chamber fundamentally changed by having experienced consciousness from perspectives they had never imagined possible. The silence that followed was absolute. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Grand Assembly Hall contained hundreds of representatives who had no words adequate to express what they had just experienced. Marcus collapsed to his knees on the platform, his consciousness matrices separating as his enhanced integration abilities finally reached their limits. But the demonstration had accomplished what words never could. Every being in the chamber now understood viscerally what transcendent consciousness integration could offer. Thought speaker Aramail was the first to recover, his mental presence touching every mind in the chamber with sensations of wonder and terror. What we have just experienced represents a fundamental revolution in the nature of consciousness itself. The barriers between species thought patterns are not absolute. They are permeable under appropriate conditions. Elder Cathon's processing systems were operating at maximum capacity as he analyzed the experience. The implications exceed all previous theoretical frameworks. If consciousness integration can be achieved safely across species boundaries, then the entire foundation of galactic civilization requires reevaluation. High Arbiter Zyxtel's massive form was trembling with barely controlled emotion. Human Marcus Chen, what you have just demonstrated transcends any question of membership or political alliance. You've revealed possibilities that could transform the fundamental nature of what it means to be a conscious being. Marcus struggled to his feet, his consciousness now returned to purely human parameters, but retaining clear memories of the integration experience. High Arbiter, what I've demonstrated is just the beginning. Humanity has developed techniques that could allow any willing species to experience similar integration without permanent modification. Lumina's crystalline form was cycling through patterns so complex that their meaning became almost incomprehensible. The experience we just shared, every representative present now, possesses memories of thinking with cognitive patterns that are not native to their species. The philosophical implications alone could occupy our scholars for centuries. Sarah moved to support her brother as he struggled with the aftereffects of consciousness separation. The Founding Council needs to understand that what you just experienced is a controlled, temporary version of what will happen naturally during the galactic convergence. The choice isn't whether to embrace consciousness integration. The choice is whether to learn to control it or be overwhelmed by it. Marcus nodded weakly, his human consciousness slowly adapting to the absence of the alien thought matrices. The convergence will bring contact with forms of consciousness that make today's demonstration seem simple by comparison. Every species in the galaxy will need to learn integration techniques or risk psychological fragmentation when they encounter truly alien forms of thought. The assembled representatives were still processing the implications of their shared experience when High Arbiter Zyxtel made an announcement that would echo through galactic history. The Founding Council hereby declares that the questions raised by humanity's petition transcend normal membership considerations. We are faced with evidence that galactic civilization itself must evolve or face extinction. He paused, his massive wings spreading wide in a display of formal authority. Therefore, the Founding Council establishes a new category of galactic citizenship, transcendent species status. This status will be granted to species that have demonstrated the ability to serve as bridges between existing galactic civilization and whatever forms of consciousness will emerge during the coming convergence. The implications hit the chamber like a physical force. Instead of simply joining the Council as another member species, humanity was being offered a role that transcended the existing structure entirely. Humanity will be granted transcendent species status, Zyxtel continued, with the understanding that this status carries responsibilities that no species in galactic history has been asked to bear. You will serve not just as members of our civilization, but as guides for its transformation into something greater than any of us can currently imagine. Marcus felt tears streaming down his face as the weight of what had been achieved finally hit him. Humanity hadn't just gained membership in the Galactic Council. They had been entrusted with helping to guide the evolution of galactic civilization itself. But Zyxtel wasn't finished. Furthermore, the Founding Council hereby establishes the Convergence Preparation Authority, with humanity serving as primary coordinators. This authority will have unprecedented resources and authorization to begin immediate preparation for galactic transformation. Sarah's helmet displays were showing tactical analyses that suggested the scope of what was being offered exceeded humanity's wildest hopes. High Arbiter, you're essentially asking humanity to help redesign galactic civilization from the ground up. That's correct, Commander Chen, Zyxtel replied, because your demonstration has proven that such redesign is not only possible but necessary. The consciousness integration you showed us represents the key to survival during the convergence, but it also represents opportunities for development that none of us had previously imagined. Thought Speaker Aramel's mental presence expanded to touch every mind in the chamber. The experience we shared today will be remembered as the moment when galactic civilization chose evolution over extinction. The question now is whether we can accomplish the necessary transformation before the convergence begins. Marcus struggled to stand on his own, drawing strength from the knowledge that everything humanity had sacrificed and risked had led to this moment. High Arbiter, on behalf of all humanity, I accept the responsibilities of transcendent species status. We will serve galactic civilization to the best of our ability, knowing that the fate of every conscious being in the galaxy may depend on our success. The Grand Assembly Hall erupted in something that was part celebration, part terror, and part determination. Representatives from hundreds of species began the complex process of coming to terms with the reality that their civilization was about to undergo transformation on a scale unprecedented in galactic history. But Marcus knew that the real work was just beginning. Achieving transcendent species status was only the first step in preparing the galaxy for challenges that would test every assumption about consciousness, identity, and survival itself. 6 months after the historic session that granted humanity transcendent species status, Marcus Chen stood in the command center of the newly constructed Convergence Preparation Facility, watching as representatives from across the galaxy participated in the first large-scale consciousness integration exercises. The facility, built in a previously empty star system using resources contributed by every member species, was larger than most space stations and more complex than anything galactic civilization had ever attempted to construct. Through the transparent aluminum walls, Marcus could see thousands of ships from hundreds of species, all carrying,